Wow. It feels so good to drink water, doesn't it? Especially when you're in Texas, 100-degree weather, outside in your yard, mowing that grass that grows like weeds. You're mowing and mowing, you get the sun on you, and you're so thirsty. And then you see your son, who helps me mow now, come with a big glass of ice-cold water. And you just drink, and it just feels so good. When you are thirsty and you have water, the relief, the feeling of just goodness that comes from drinking just plain water. No, I don't want a coffee. I don't want a caramel macchiato with all the fixings. When I'm really, really thirsty, I don't want a Red Bull. I don't want a Gatorade. I want clear, crisp, ice-cold, refreshing water. You know why? Because I'm thirsty. And when you're thirsty, you need to get hydrated. And water is such a miracle, isn't it? Clear, tasteless, odorless, so refreshing. You know that most of our body is made of water, right? You're basically just contained water that is just floating around there. We need water. Water is an essential for life. And in the United States, there's such abundance of everything. We have lakes, we have rivers, we have so much water. We can afford having green lawns, even in 100-degree weather. We can afford just having pools, having water parks. There's so much water everywhere. But if you waste it, things can get tricky. The other day, we were mowing the lawn. And it's so hot, and I'm drinking water, and I'm getting dehydrated. You just start feeling dehydrated when you sweat, and you start getting that headache. You know you need to have a break, right? And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go take a shower. Cold, nice, refreshing shower. So I go take a shower, open the water, and you're just ready to jump in, right? And I jumped in cold water, and the water was like 95-degree hot. I'm like, what in the world? What's going on here? So I got out to my wife, hey, have you checked the water? Have you noticed that our cold water now comes out hot? Have you noticed that in your neighborhood? All of our tap water now is coming hot. So I'm not a conspiracy theory kind of guy, but also the water felt a little bit more slimy. I'm like, oh, something weird is going on. And then it had this funny taste and this funny smell. I'm like, they want to genetically engineer us right now. No, slow down. So I went to the internet, I checked on the city's page, and I called the water technician. It's right there. Anybody can call them. I'm sure they're loving having many calls, like people like me, right? Hey, I live in Cedar Hill, and I just want to make sure that everything is going okay with the tap water, because I turned on the cold water, and well, it's not cold. It's really hot. And he said, yes, it's really hot, and also you will notice that it feels a little bit slimy, right? Right. And it has a funny odor, right? Yes. Yeah, you got it, bro. You got it. So what's wrong with us? It's like, well, what's going on is this. It's so hot, and everybody's using so much water that we have to tap into a really deep well that we have so we can supplement the consumption. And that well is so deep in the earth that the water comes at about 105 degrees. So we have to cool it down in tanks so you get it at a balmy 95 degrees. Oh. And it's just softer water. That's why it feels slimy. And yes, we tested. Yes, it's perfectly safe to drink. You're good. So I'm like, okay, just one little detail, because this is American. Everything has to be perfect, right? Even oranges, they look perfect. Bananas, everything has to be perfect. So when it's getting this a little bit cooler the way it's supposed to be, the way God meant it, he told me, when we start using less water. So when are you using less water? I'm like, oh. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad he said. You see, such basic things like water are easy to take for granted. Just because we open the tap and we get fresh water, clear, tested, safe, it's easy to take for granted. We drink it in bottles, we have it in pools, we use it to water the lawns. It's such a basic essential of life and so easy to take for granted. Did you know that close to 2 billion people in the world don't have access to safe, regularly available tap water? Many people in the world don't have access either to sewer. Millions of people die every year because of waterborne illnesses like cholera, all sorts of parasites. Girls in Africa, in some places in Asia, some places in the world, they are the essential vehicle to carry water home from wherever they can find it. Things that we take for granted and are absolutely essential for life, many people in this world don't have. We live in a very thirsty world. And sometimes, even though we have readily available water to drink and tap water and everything, sometimes we prefer other things, don't we? We prefer soft drinks, and we end up dehydrated because we drink so much caffeine. Caffeine dehydrates you. That then you get headaches, that then you're chronically fatigued because you don't drink the basics of water. And then we end up with things like kidney stones, right? Too many Coca-Colas, right? Well, Diet Coke is good for you. Tell that kidney stone. That kidney stone is not going to be good for you. But even though we have it, sometimes we don't come to satisfy that thirst. You know, we're talking about this sermon series, I Surrender All, a sermon series on worship. Worship is about the most foundational and essential need we have as human beings. It's so foundational that the Bible sometimes uses the metaphor of thirsting for our longing for God. Thirsting as that fundamental drive for life that we need to have satisfied or we will die. With thirst, we long for God. Psalm 42 says, as the deer pants, thirsts for the waters, so my soul thirsts for you. Our need for God, our need for life in relationship with God is such that we constantly thirst and long for God. And if we don't get spiritually hydrated, if we don't come to God and drink deeply, we live our life chronically fatigued, dehydrated, with spiritual restlessness that just like thirst drives us to satisfy more. You know, the people of Israel in the Old Testament knew the one true God, knew God, this God of the covenant that had come to release them from the slavery of Egypt. But as they became more powerful, as they had options, they left God and they used idols. They substituted the spiritual water of God's living fountain, life-giving life. And they did idols. And look at how God speaks to them in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. It says, for my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and have made cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that hold no water. The people of Israel had in God a fountain of living waters to quench the spiritual thirst. And you know what they said? No, thank you. We're going to find our own drinks. We're going to find our own way to satisfy this craving. They had idols. They had immorality. They had their own drinks. But they were still thirsty. And just like digging that deep well, they had to dig deeper and deeper and found no water. They found all sorts of other things, but they didn't find what they were looking for. Today in our worship series, we're going to move from Matthew to the next book in the Gospels that contains the most number of worship words from Jesus' lips, actually, and a conversation he had with a woman in John chapter 4. And we're going to do that in a second. Before you go to John chapter 4, let me ask you this. When we talk about worship, what need does worship really meet? Because more and more, the next generation starts seeing worship as a leftover from what is now obsolete, from organized religion, from institutional loyalty. This gathering together and assembling to worship is not necessary anymore. We have everything we need. We have science. We have technology. We can communicate with the rest of the world in the palm of our hands. We have satellites. We have medicine. We have everything. What need does worship really meet? I can get together with friends somewhere else. Is our relationship with God really even relevant anymore? Well, today we're going to see in this encounter with Jesus that actually worship goes to the heart of our most fundamental need, what we truly need. So if you have your Bible, I'm going to invite you to open it in John chapter 4. John chapter 4, we're going to read of an encounter of Jesus with a woman that had a chance to identify her true need. John chapter 4, verse 1 to 26. I'm going to read it. I invite you to read it with me. For John 4, 1 to 26 says this. Now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. He had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who is it that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You're right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem is the place where we ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you, I'm he." In this passage, we have a powerful story. And the purpose of this story is to teach us what worshiping really means. In this passage, the word worship or a related word appears 10 times in this particular passage, mostly from the lips of Jesus. The other times from the conversation and the woman. It is so important, the teaching of worship, that Jesus takes time to walk this woman through the greatest need that she has. If you see, there's a progression in how Jesus is talking to her. There's a progression from the physical to the emotional and relational to the spiritual. Worship is that which brings us into the presence of God so that we understand what our true need really is. We all come to God with all sorts of agendas. People in the Gospels were looking for Jesus for all sorts of needs, because every one of us is a creature. And as creatures, we're not the creator, and we, by definition, need. God made us to need him. God made us to need food. God made us to need sustenance. We don't live on our own. We live in dependence of God. What? Wait a minute, tomorrow is Independence Day. What we want to be is independent, right? Well, Here's the tricky thing. In the Bible, the only one who is sovereign is God himself. We're not sovereign. God made us to follow him, to obey him, to submit to him, to depend on him. To depend on him is the right thing, and to depend on him, to surrender to him, is the heart of worship. But when we depend on other things, and when we worship other things, when we have idols, when we become dependent on those idols, we become enslaved to them. Jesus said it this way, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. But if the Son sets you free, you're free indeed. Oh, is it possible to be dependent on God and be free at the same time? Yes. Freedom doesn't mean that you're sovereign. Freedom means that you now have a chance to serve the one that made you and that really sets you free to live for his purposes. Everybody must choose whom to serve. There's nobody that's absolutely free. And I'll tell you this, you breathe, right? You need water. You need things to live. Even more, you need God to live. Whether you realize it or not, you and I are always thirsty. Augustine said it this way, you made us for you, O God, and our heart is restless until we find rest in you. Let's take a look at how this woman went on a journey to find true rest for her needs. Worship leads us to an encounter with Christ where he offers to meet our deepest need. Do you know your deepest need? What do you need? When you come to worship, even if you're already a follower of Jesus Christ, we come with so many agendas to worship. What do we truly need? Well, hang on. We're going to peel this like an onion, layer by layer. We'll see how Jesus walked this woman through her needs to see what she truly needs. So, Jesus wants to meet our deepest need. What is that? Well, Jesus begins with our physical needs. Our physical needs are doors to acknowledge our true needs. We all start approaching God because we have a need. Sometimes that need is very pressing and is very physical. Like what? When we get sick, when we have loss, when somebody dies, when there's scarcity, when we don't have money, when we need medicine, we don't have what it takes. When we have physical needs, our physical needs scream somebody to help us. And when we look everywhere and nobody can help us, we look up to heaven and finally say, God, if you are there, we start somewhere. People in the gospel flock to Jesus. The multitudes flock to Jesus because he could heal, because he could feed them. Remember after feeding the 5,000 in the Gospel of John later on? You see people coming to Jesus and ask, Rabbi, when did you come here? And Jesus tells them, you seek me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the bread and you were full. Many people came to Jesus because of their physical needs. In this story, we have a woman that is going to draw water. Now, don't miss this detail. We've read the whole story. We see there are some issues, some deeper issues with the woman, but she goes to get water at the 6th hour. When is that? Right at noon. And the sun in Palestine is probably as kind as the sun in Texas at some seasons of the year. It can get pretty warm. Normally, people went to get water either early in the morning, late in the evening, when it was a little cooler. But this woman is going very much on purpose on the hottest time of the day. Now, interesting, if you notice, there's a little bit of tension in Jesus' ministry himself. People are starting to compare Jesus with John the Baptist. There's this religious competition. Ooh, did you know that that church is bigger than yours? You don't have such a cool building. Jesus is baptizing more than John the Baptist. You know what? Jesus is not in the comparison game. So he withdraws from all that, and he is going on a journey. And it says right there that it was necessary for him to go through Samaria now. Samaria was the best and clearest path to go where he was going, but it wasn't the only one. Many Jews chose to go around because there was a big tension between the Jewish people and the Samaritans. Samaritans were seen as half-breeds. If you read in your Old Testament, 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 29 to 34, tells you that the Samaritans were the result when the Assyrians came and conquered the 10 tribes of the kingdom of Israel. They took them captive, but they replanted those lands with people from all sorts of nations. And they interbred with the people that were left behind, and a mestizo race was born there, the Samaritans. And the Samaritans were syncretistic. They had a lot of the Jewish traditions and theology, but they had their own mixture of religions and pagan customs, all sorts of things. And the Jewish people were so antagonistic against them that we're like, we don't even fellowship with them. If you touch a Samaritan woman, you're automatically unclean, all sorts of prejudice that separated them. But it was necessary for Jesus to go to this place, to find a woman that is trying to meet a very physical need. She needs water. She needs water to survive. Now, I don't want you to miss this. It says right there that Jesus was tired from the way. Guess what? The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus, being perfectly human, sinless human, came to share our needs. Jesus is Almighty God, maker of heaven and earth, but in his humanity, he identifies with us. And Jesus can get tired and fall asleep in the boat, or he can get thirsty and sit right there in the well. His humanity is the way God has identified with us and with our needs. He's 100% God, 100% man. He is one God with two natures. In his humanity, Jesus shows us that he is a God who cares. He cares. So he's there with this woman, and he takes initiative saying, give me a drink. A scholar, observing the tensions in this passage tells us this. He says, D.A. Carson, he says, John maintained a contrast between the woman of this narrative and Nicodemus of chapter 3. In chapter 3, Nicodemus was a learned, powerful, respected, orthodox, theologically trained. She, on the other hand, was unschooled, without influence, despised, capable only of folk religion. He was a man, a Jew, a ruler. She was a woman, a Samaritan, a moral outcast. And both, I don't want you to miss this, both needed Jesus. Nicodemus came at night, hiding because he didn't want to stain his reputation. This woman comes in the noon, in the high of the day, in bright light, and right there in that bright light, isolated from society, she has an encounter with Jesus Christ. An encounter with a God who understands her needs and her longings better than she does herself. And he takes initiative saying, give me a drink. And the woman is, there are so many divisions that separate us, you and me. There is no possible that we can even start having this conversation. You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. You've hated us for centuries. How dare you asking me to help you with this? But Jesus digs deeper and says, if you knew who's asking you, and you knew the gift of God. I don't want you to miss what Jesus is saying right there. What is the gift of God? The gift of God is God himself. If you knew what God has come to give you, you would be the one taking the initiative and asking me, and I would give you a true living water. She's like, oh my goodness. Now, by the way, living water is a common term used in the scriptures to talk about the water that flows, like rivers, water that's moving. It's not stagnant, prone to disease. It's water that is coming from a spring. So she's like, I've been drinking from this stinking well, and you have a spring that I don't know of? Tell me where it is. You see? Physical needs. You want this church to be filled to the brim? You want it to be completely packed to the gills? Let's start giving free things. If we start giving free things, if we give gift cards, if we give things, people will come. If we start giving, what if I had the gift of healing right here in my left hand? Last week, somebody told me, Pastor, it looks like you can slay the spirit. No. That we had a medical emergency last week. Thank goodness she's fine, right? But if I had some miraculous power that everybody would be attracted to, oh my goodness, if we could put a show here, people will flock. But Jesus didn't come to put a show. Jesus came to dig deep into our heart. So our physical needs reveal that there is more. There's more. But Jesus doesn't stop there. He goes deeper to our emotional and relational needs. Right when he has the attention of the lady, Jesus masterfully says, all right, go call your husband. But we still have our defenses, right? They don't need to really get to know you. We can say half-truths, right? So she says, well, I have no husband. Is that true? That's true. But that's just a screen so that Jesus doesn't get deeper. But Jesus can see right through us. When you come to Jesus with your spiritual, with your physical needs, Jesus can see that there is so much more that we need. And he keeps digging deeper and deeper and deeper and says, Miguel, what you need is not just to have your electricity paid. What you need is not just to have your health restored. What you need is deeper than that. So he tells this woman, go get your husband. I don't have a husband. And Jesus sees right through her and says, you're right, because you've had 5 husbands. The one you have now is not your husband. Ouch. Did you ever watch that show, The Mentalist? Or when the mentalist could just look at little cues here and there, Jesus is almost like spooky, right? But Jesus is not playing cheap psychology. Jesus is the one who has in Revelation the eyes that burn like fire, that can see through our excuses. He is the God who knows the heart and the mind, and He knows. He knows this woman is coming at noon to get water because she's been living with multiple partners. Now, what happened to the husbands? Is she immoral? We don't know a whole lot about this woman. Maybe she was a widow five times. But maybe there was more. Maybe those couples, maybe she had a compulsion. Maybe she had a sexual addiction. The one she has now is not her husband. She's been going down a spiral descent of relational needs that have made her a social outcast. You think that the many people that roam our streets in downtown right now are there just because they want to? Homeless? Addicted to this or that? Sure. We've all made our choices. But many times, this broken world marginalizes some in such a way that it is easier to put them on the margins than to bring them into the presence of God. But I want you to see that Jesus cares. Where we don't care, even as a church, we're a work in progress. Nobody cares the way Jesus cares. Jesus goes out of His way, and that's where He's dragging us as a body. He's pouring His compassion in our heart to change this heart of stone into a heart of flesh, so we see people the way He sees them. And He goes and meets with this woman and says, go call your husband. I don't have a husband. That's true. Now we're getting somewhere. We're starting to talk truthfully. But she goes to religion. And that's where worship becomes so important. When you start moving from just the physical to what afflicts your soul, the grudges, the bitterness, the sins of the soul, you know you need help. You may have everything. You may have plenty of water, plenty of money, plenty of health, but you know that deep down your heart, you have longings and conflicts that you still carry. You may be at odds with a brother, a sister, your wife, your children. I don't know. But we all need relational and emotional help. You know what? The United States has so much, and we are living a crisis of drugs and opioids. Even drugs that we use as medicine, now we use them to numb the pain that we feel, the depression, the anger. All of that is because we keep digging deeper, and instead of coming to God with our needs, we keep putting screens. I'm okay. How are you? Oh, I'm good. I'm okay. But you know you're not okay. You know that you're depressed. You know your marriage is about to fall apart. You know your kids don't even want to be with you. Because what you're becoming is a person on survival, isolated and on your own. But Jesus comes to meet you and says, there is more. So the woman says, I think you're a prophet. Let's talk religion. Our fathers have worshipped in this mountain, and you Jewish people say that only in Jerusalem. She's used to arguing religion with the Jews, but not with this Jewish rabbi, right? Jesus, in all compassion, says, listen, the hour is coming, and the hour is now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Not in this mountain. It's not about the place. It's not about the form. It's about the person that you come to. You need to know that God is a Father that is seeking you and wants you and is looking for you. And what does He want for you? From you? That you come to Him with your spiritual needs, and that you come to Him truthfully. Nobody forces you. You're not trying to get something out of it. What you want is Him. And right there, we get to the meat of the passage, our spiritual needs. Once we know how broken we are in our spirit, our emotional needs, our relational needs, we're finally ready to say, I need help. God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. So in that moment, the woman says, you know what? Yeah, I wish I could worship that way. And listen, there is the hope. She says, I know the Messiah, I know the King is coming. This social outcast, this woman that was used to being despised because she lived in immorality, this Samaritan woman that no Jewish man would dare looking at, let alone touch, has hope in the coming of the liberating King, the Messiah. And she says, when he comes, he'll finally tell us everything. He'll make things right. There'll be no more of this ethnicity, man and woman. There'll be no more of this divisiveness that shows most in worship. There will be one God and one people. He will make everything right. And then Jesus looks at her. Can you imagine that moment? Jesus tries to hide his identity in the Gospels everywhere, but he reveals himself to those who are humble in heart. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They will be filled. Let me ask you this. Are you thirsty? Because when you're thirsty, you want water, you want to drink, you want to satisfy this thirst. And this woman is so thirsty, but she's been hiding that thirst. She's been drinking substitutes. She's been digging cisterns that have no water. And finally, she has a chance to look into Jesus' eyes. And Jesus says, the one you've been waiting for, that's the one that I am. I am He. And I am here with you. Because not only do you need physical drinking water, not only do you need somebody to put your heart together, who you truly need, it's me. And I make room to meet you right here today. For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, so that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but may have eternal life. This woman, startled, leaves everything behind and goes to her village. You know why? Because she's been so thirsty. She's been so thirsty. She's not sure she should drink. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus goes and visits a couple of friends. And he's staying in their house, Martha and Mary, Lazarus' family. Mary and Martha are busy trying to put this party together for Jesus, but Mary is so captivated by Jesus sitting at his feet, listening to him, just enraptured by what Jesus is saying. Martha's busy cooking, it says, distracted with many things. And Martha gets grumpy and says, Jesus, don't you care that my sister is letting me serve alone? And Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you're so worried and so busy with so many things, but there is, listen, Jesus says, there is only one necessary thing. Only one. Only one necessary thing. And Mary has chosen the right part right here with me. That will never be taken away from her. You want to know what you truly need, what I truly need, what we all truly need? We do not need stuff. We got plenty of stuff. Look at all the storages everywhere that we have. We have so much stuff. We need the life that flows from Jesus Christ. And worship, when we worship together, when you read your Bible at home, when you pray, when you come into His presence, Jesus offers Himself to you and brings you to the Father. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really love this land, you got to share the life of God. Somebody gave His life, Jesus Christ, so that you and I may have life. It is not okay to keep it to ourselves. Those who have drunk freely from the well of Jesus Christ, from the living waters of Jesus Christ, now have it inside by His Spirit to share. Don't keep it to yourself. Let me close with this. So keep thinking about worship. Worship is no longer worship when we delight more in the things outside us than in the Christ within us. Think about that for a second. Who do you delight in? Do you delight more in the things outside or in the Christ inside? Because if we delight more on the stuff outside than in the Christ that lives in us by His Spirit, then we're just like the people of Israel, digging broken cisterns that have no water. Delight yourself in the Lord, Psalm 37 says, and He will grant you the desires of your heart. First the delight, then the granting. Because when you delight in Jesus, He becomes the desire of your heart. Are you thirsty yet? Come and drink. We're coming to the Lord's Supper now. But we're going to have a time to respond to the Lord. We're going to have a time to come to Him, just to tell Him that we need Him. Now, how interesting, isn't it? Jesus chose the symbols of the Lord's Supper, the bread and the cup, our food, our drink, our hunger, our thirst, to remind us that if there is a need we have, this need is for Him. So I'm going to invite you right there in your place to prepare for the Lord's Supper. If you haven't confessed your sins, this is a time to confess your sin. If you haven't told Jesus, thank you, Jesus, for what you did for me, this is a good time to do that. As we listen to this song, join Psalm 42 saying, Lord, my soul thirsts for you. My soul longs for you.